You guys loved our video about the top 10 draft steals, but today I wanted to switch it up and talk about the 10 greatest draft steals of the pre-merger era. Guys who were playing before there were millions of dollars on the line, and the ones who paved the way for the sport we love today. If you're looking forward to the video, press the like button. In the grand history of the NFL, some of the most legendary players didn't hear their names called in the first round, or even the second. Among these hidden gems, few shine brighter than Willie Davis, a Hall of Fame defensive end who turned out to be one of the greatest draft steals of all time. Drafted in the 15th round, yes, 15th of the 1956 NFL Draft by the Cleveland Browns. Davis was passed over by nearly every team multiple times. Maybe it was because he played at Grambling State, a historically black college that didn't get the same spotlight as powerhouse programs. Maybe it was just bad scouting. Either way, the NFL almost completely missed on a guy who would go on to define the Green Bay Packers defense in the Vince Lombardi era. Davis didn't even hit his stride until he was traded to the Packers in 1960, 4 years after being drafted. Once in Green Bay, he became a force of nature. He played 10 seasons for the Packers, racking up unofficial sack totals that some historians estimate to be well over 100. Though sacks weren't an official stat until 1982. Davis wasn't just a pass rusher though. He was the emotional leader of a defense that helped deliver 5 NFL championships, including the first 2 Super Bowls. He was named an All-Pro 5 times and was selected to the Pro Bowl 5 times as well, earning a reputation as one of the most intelligent and technically gifted linemen of his generation. What makes Willie Davis such a remarkable draft steal isn't just his production, it's the impact he had on one of the greatest dynasties in football history. While quarterbacks and running backs typically get all the glory, Davis anchored the trenches with grit and grace. He was known for his leadership just as much as his athleticism. In fact, Lombardi once said Davis was a player I could always count on the field and off. And here's the kicker, Davis earned an MBA from the University of Chicago while still playing in the NFL. Imagine racking up sacks on Sunday then grinding through finance homework on Monday. It's that kind of work ethic and drive that made him great, and that made every team that passed on him look like absolute fools. So yeah, when we talk about draft steals, forget the Tom Bradys and the Shannon Sharps for a second. Willie Davis was doing this before it was cool. He's not just a draft steal, he's a Hall of Fame heist. Buried deep in the dusty archives of the early 1960s is a name that rarely gets mentioned in those conversations. Joe Schmidt, a linebacker drafted in the 7th round of the 1953 NFL Draft by the Detroit Lions. Schmidt turned out to be a diamond in the rough, a classic example of how elite talent can sometimes slip through the cracks of the scouting system. Coming out of the University of Pittsburgh, Schmidt wasn't exactly considered a can't-miss prospect. He was solid, sure, but he didn't have the fanfare of a top pick. Back then, the NFL wasn't pouring millions into scouting departments or combine analysis. You had to rely on grit, instinct, and hope the guy you were drafting had the brains and brawn to survive in a brutal, unforgiving league. Joe Schmidt had both, and then some. Schmidt not only made the Lions roster, but quickly became the anchor of one of the best defenses of the 1950s. He was a cerebral linebacker with excellent instincts and a knack for diagnosing plays before the ball was even snapped. He captained Detroit's defense during their glory years, helping the team to back-to-back championship appearances in 1953 and 1954, and again in 1957 when they won the NFL title. Over a 13-season career, all with the Lions, Joe Schmidt racked up 8 Pro Bowl selections, 2 first-team All-Pro honors, and was widely regarded as one of the smartest linebackers of his generation. In an era that didn't yet record tackles or sacks, Schmidt's impact came through leadership, film study, and always being in the right place at the right time. Opposing quarterbacks dreaded seeing number 56 roaming the middle of the field. What makes Schmidt such a monumental draft steal is the length, consistency, and leadership he brought to the franchise. A 7th rounder becoming the face of a defense, that just doesn't happen very often, then or now. He was eventually inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1973, a fitting capstone for a player who was nearly forgotten on draft day. In an era when late-round draft picks were often written off, Jackie Smith's selection in the 10th round of the 1963 NFL Draft by the St. Louis Cardinals stands as one of the most remarkable steals in league history. Coming out of Northwestern State, a small Louisiana school with limited national attention, Smith flew under the radar, yet his impact would soon eclipse players chosen far earlier. As a rookie, Smith didn't just make the team, he exploded onto the scene. When an injury opened the door for him to start, he responded with a monster performance. 9 catches for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns in a single game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That breakout game set the tone for a career that would redefine what a tight end could be. Over the next 15 seasons, Smith became the centerpiece of the Cardinals' offense. He played in 210 games and recorded 480 receptions for 7,918 yards and 40 touchdowns. By the time he retired, he held the record for most receiving yards by a tight end in NFL history. Even more impressive, his career average of 16.5 yards per reception remains the highest ever among Hall of Fame tight ends, a mind-boggling stat that shows just how dangerous he was downfield. He wasn't just a security blanket, he was a vertical threat in an era when tight ends were mostly glorified blockers. Smith was named to 5 consecutive Pro Bowls and earned multiple All-Pro honors. In 1967, he posted one of the best seasons ever by a tight end. 56 catches for 1,205 yards and 9 touchdowns. He wasn't just one of the best at his position, he was one of the league's top receivers, period. Late in his career, Smith joined the Dallas Cowboys and made it to Super Bowl 13. While he's unfortunately remembered by many for a dropped touchdown in that game, it's unfair to let a single moment overshadow a career filled with excellence. That drop didn't define him, his body of work did. In 1994, Jackie Smith was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It was a fitting end to a journey that began as a long-shot draft pick and ended with a bronze bust in Canton. Smith's story is the ultimate proof that greatness doesn't always come gift-wrapped in the first round. Sometimes it's hiding in the 10th. When you talk about legendary NFL safeties, the list has to start with Larry Wilson, a name synonymous with toughness, intelligence, and pure playmaking. But what makes Wilson even more remarkable is how he entered the league as the 74th overall pick in the 7th round of the 1960 NFL Draft. That's right, one of the greatest defensive backs in NFL history was nearly a footnote on draft day. At 6 feet tall and barely 190 pounds, coming out of the University of Utah, Wilson wasn't expected to be much more than a depth piece. Instead, he changed the way the safety position was played forever. Initially drafted as a cornerback, Wilson made the switch to free safety early in his career with the St. Louis Cardinals, and that's when the magic began. Under the guidance of defensive coordinator Chuck Drulis, Wilson became the prototype for what's now called the rover or blitzing safety. Drulis designed a defensive package known as the Wildcats, specifically to take advantage of Wilson's unique blend of speed, awareness, and fearlessness. He was one of the first safeties ever used as a consistent blitzer, often flying in off the edge and blowing up plays in the backfield before the quarterback could even react. Wilson's stats are jaw-dropping for his era. 52 career interceptions over 13 seasons, all with the Cardinals. He led the league in interceptions in 1966 with 10, despite playing half the season with 2 broken hands and casts. That's not an exaggeration or a football myth. He literally played with 2 casts on and still picked off passes. It's one of the most badass things anyone has ever done on a football field. He was an 8-time Pro Bowler, a 6-time first-team All-Pro, and was named to the NFL's 75th and 100th anniversary all-time teams. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1978, just 6 years after retiring. Beyond the accolades, Wilson was a true leader, known for his preparation, his toughness, and his absolute refusal to let his team quit. He later transitioned into executive roles, helping guide the Cardinals franchise off the field as well. What makes Larry Wilson one of the greatest draft steals ever isn't just the talent, it's the innovation. He didn't just play safety, he redefined what a safety could be. From 7th round pick to Hall of Famer, Wilson's career is a masterclass in turning doubt into dominance. Roosevelt Brown is one of the greatest draft steals in NFL history, full stop. Drafted in the 27th round of the 1953 NFL Draft by the New York Giants, Brown was the 321st overall pick. In today's NFL, the draft doesn't even go that deep. Teams stop picking by that point. Most guys drafted that late don't even make it to training camp, let alone forge a Hall of Fame career. But Brown didn't just stick around. He dominated, and he did it for well over a decade. Coming out of Morgan State, a historically black college with limited exposure in the early 1950s, Brown wasn't on many scouting radars. But the Giants took a flyer on him, and it ended up being one of the smartest moves in franchise history. At 6'3" and around 255 pounds, Brown was considered undersized for an offensive tackle, even by 1950s standards. But what he lacked in mass, he made up for with elite athleticism, quick feet, and a cerebral understanding of the game. He was fast, agile, and strong, and once he got his hands on a defender, the play was over.
Like handing up the
Brown quickly earned a starting spot at left tackle and became the anchor of the Giants' offensive line for the next 13 seasons. He protected quarterbacks like Charlie Connerly and later Y.A. Tittle, and opened massive holes for legendary running backs like Frank Gifford. In 1956, Brown helped lead the Giants to an NFL championship, and he was a huge part of their dominance throughout the late 50s and early 60s when they were perennial contenders. He was selected to 9 Pro Bowls, named first-team All-Pro 6 times, and was widely regarded by his peers and coaches as one of the best offensive linemen of his era. In fact, Vince Lombardi, who was the Giants offensive coordinator before his Green Bay glory days, once called Brown the best lineman he ever coached. That's not exactly faint praise. Brown retired in 1965 and was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1975. His legacy as a trailblazer extends beyond the field as well. He was one of the first black superstars on the offensive line, paving the way, literally and figuratively, for generations to come. A 27th round pick who became a Hall of Fame tackle, a 9-time Pro Bowler, and one of the most respected linemen in NFL history, that's not just a draft steal, that's grand larceny. Roosevelt Brown didn't just defy expectations, he made the league regret ever doubting him. Raymond Berry is the definition of a draft steal, and a football technician who made up for what he lacked in raw athleticism with a level of precision and work ethic that few in NFL history have ever matched. Drafted in the 20th round of the 1954 NFL Draft by the Baltimore Colts, Berry was the 232nd overall pick. At the time, he was viewed as a long shot to make the roster. He was slow, skinny, had poor eyesight, and needed special shoes because one leg was shorter than the other. Not exactly the scouting profile of a future Hall of Famer. But once Berry got to Baltimore, he did something most late-round picks dream of. He outworked everyone. What he lacked in speed, he made up for with route running so crisp it could slice through steel. He studied film obsessively, ran thousands of routes in practice, and developed an almost telepathic connection with Hall of Fame quarterback Johnny Unitas. The two became one of the most iconic duos in NFL history, built on timing, trust, and hours of behind-the-scenes grind. Berry wasn't just good, he was unstoppable. From 1957 to 1961, he led the NFL in receptions 3 times and receiving yards twice. In 1959, he caught 66 passes for 959 yards and 14 touchdowns. Monstrous numbers for the era. But his most iconic performance came in the 1958 NFL Championship game, dubbed the greatest game ever played. Berry caught 12 passes for 178 yards and a touchdown, helping the Colts defeat the Giants in overtime in the game that introduced the NFL to a national TV audience. Berry's performance that day didn't just make him a star, it helped launch the NFL into a new era of popularity. Over the course of his 13-year career, all with the Colts, Berry totaled 631 receptions, 9,275 receiving yards, and 68 touchdowns. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time first-team All-Pro, and led the NFL in receptions 3 different seasons. He retired as the all-time leader in both receptions and receiving yards, and in 1973, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. What makes Berry's story so remarkable is that he wasn't born with freakish talent. He built himself into a legend through work, repetition, and a commitment to perfection. A 20th round pick who became one of the best wide receivers the game has ever seen, Raymond Berry is more than a draft steal. He's living proof that greatness doesn't always come naturally, but it can be earned one route at a time. Bart Starr might be the most poetic draft steal in NFL history, a man who not only defied the odds as a 17th round pick in the 1956 NFL Draft, but who went on to become the calm, steady heartbeat of one of the greatest dynasties the sport has ever seen. Drafted 200th overall by the Green Bay Packers, Starr wasn't even the starter at Alabama for most of his college career. Injuries, a coaching change, and an offense that didn't let him showcase his passing skills made him an afterthought in the draft. Most teams didn't see a future star, they saw a backup with limited tape and a questionable resume. But Vince Lombardi saw something else. When Lombardi took over as head coach of the Packers in 1959, Starr was entering his 4th season, still a backup. But Lombardi recognized Starr's intelligence, leadership, and quiet confidence, and eventually made him the full-time starter. That decision helped birth a dynasty. Starr wasn't flashy, he didn't have a cannon arm or blazing speed. What he had was precision, poise under pressure, and an unmatched ability to execute exactly what Lombardi wanted on the field. He was the perfect extension of his coach's will. During the 1960s, Starr led the Packers to 5 5 NFL championships, including victories in the first 2 Super Bowls. He was named MVP of both Super Bowls 1 and 2, and his playoff record was an astonishing 9-1. In an era dominated by rugged defenses and power running games, Starr was the efficient engine that made the Packers machine hum. He didn't put up eye-popping stats by modern standards, but his career passer rating of 80.5 was elite for the time, and in the postseason, it skyrocketed to 104.8, showing just how clutch he truly was. Perhaps the most iconic moment of Starr's career came in the 1967 NFL Championship, better known as the Ice Bowl. With temperatures near -15 degrees and the field frozen solid, Starr orchestrated a game-winning drive in the final minutes. On 4th and inches at the goal line with 16 seconds left, he made the call to sneak it himself and crossed into the end zone for the win. It was gutsy, brilliant, and perfectly Bart Starr. Starr retired with 2 Super Bowl MVPs, a league MVP, 5 championships, and a Hall of Fame gold jacket. Not bad for the 200th pick. He wasn't just a draft steal, he was the soul of a football empire. Quiet greatness never looks so loud. Johnny Unitas is arguably the greatest draft steal in NFL history. A man whose journey from afterthought to icon reads like a Hollywood script. Drafted in the 9th round of the 1955 NFL Draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers with the 102nd overall pick, Unitas didn't even make it out of training camp. The Steelers cut him before he ever played a down, deeming him too raw, too skinny, and frankly, not good enough. For most players, that would have been the end of the road. But for Unitas, it was just the beginning. After being cut, he worked construction jobs in Pittsburgh to support his young family while playing semi-pro football on weekends for $6 a game. That might have broken other men, but it made Johnny U tougher. In 1956, the Baltimore Colts gave him a tryout. No expectations, no guarantees, just a long shot. And by the end of that season, he was the starter. Unitas brought a new era of passing to the NFL. He was the first quarterback to truly master the 2-minute drill, throwing with timing, accuracy, and swagger in a league that was still dominated by running backs and brute force. From 1957 to 1967, he was the most feared quarterback in football. He threw a touchdown pass in 47 consecutive games, a record that stood for more than 50 years. He led the league in passing yards 4 times and touchdown passes 4 times. In 1959, he threw for 32 touchdowns in a 12-game season, an absurd number for the era. And of course, there's the 1958 NFL Championship, the greatest game ever played. In front of a massive national television audience, Unitas orchestrated a game-tying drive late in the 4th quarter, and then led the Colts to victory in overtime, cementing both his legacy and the NFL's rise to mainstream popularity. He made it look effortless, calm, collected, and lethal. By the time he retired, Unitas had 3 NFL MVPs, 5 All-Pro selections, a Super Bowl ring, and over 40,000 passing yards. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1979 and is still widely regarded as one of the top quarterbacks of all time. What makes Johnny Unitas the ultimate draft steal isn't just the stats or the wins. It's that every team in the league had a shot at him and passed. He wasn't just overlooked, he was flat out rejected, and he turned that rejection into greatness, one perfectly thrown spiral at a time. Deacon Jones wasn't just a draft steal, he was a thunderbolt that changed the game forever. Selected in the 14th round of the 1961 NFL Draft by the Los Angeles Rams with the 186th overall pick, Jones was barely a blip on the radar. He came from Mississippi Vocational College, now Mississippi Valley State, a small, overlooked HBCU with minimal scouting attention at the time. Most teams didn't know his name. The Rams took a chance, and what they got in return was the man who literally coined the term sack. From the moment Deacon Jones stepped onto the field, he played like he had something to prove, and like he was personally offended that quarterbacks were allowed to stand upright. He wasn't just dominant, he was revolutionary. A defensive end with incredible speed, strength, and a relentless motor, Jones terrorized offenses for 14 seasons. And while sacks weren't an official NFL stat until 1982, historians estimate he recorded 173.5 sacks, including back-to-back seasons with 21.5 sacks in 1967 and 1968, both in 14-game seasons. If those numbers were official, he'd still rank among the top sack artists in NFL history. Jones didn't just play defense, he weaponized it. He popularized the now banned head slap, a move where he'd slap offensive linemen in the helmet so hard it would literally disorient them for a split second, just long enough for him to blow by. He played angry, fast, and mean, and he made it cool to be a defensive lineman. Before Deacon, quarterbacks were the stars. After Deacon, pass rushers got their own spotlight. He was the cornerstone of the Rams' legendary fearsome foursome defensive line alongside Merlin Olsen, Rosie Greer, and Lamar Lundy. Together, they made Sundays a nightmare for offenses. But Deacon was the showstopper. He was named first-team All-Pro 5 times, made 8 Pro Bowls, and was twice named the league's Defensive Player of the Year. Off the field, Jones was charismatic, outspoken, and impossible to ignore. He called himself the Secretary of Defense and backed it up every single week. In 1980, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where his bust still carries that unmistakable scowl that quarterbacks used to see in their nightmares. Deacon Jones wasn't just a draft steal, he was grand theft defensive end. The 186th pick turned into a cultural force, an innovator, and one of the most feared players to ever line up across the line of scrimmage. Every sack in today's NFL owes a little something to Deacon. After all, he gave it a name and a face. Roger Staubach may be the greatest draft steal to ever wear a star on his helmet. Drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in the 10th round of the 1964 NFL Draft with the 129th overall pick, Staubach wasn't passed over because of talent, he was passed over because of time. After winning the Heisman Trophy in 1963 at Navy, Staubach owed the US military a 4-year service commitment. Most NFL teams didn't want to wait, the Cowboys did, and it changed their franchise forever. By the time Staubach joined the Cowboys in 1969, he was already 27 years old, having served in Vietnam and various naval posts. Most quarterbacks are hitting their prime by that age. Staubach was just getting started, and once he got on the field, it was clear he was worth every bit of the wait. His mobility, poise, and knack for late-game magic made him the perfect quarterback for the era and the perfect fit for Tom Landry's innovative offense. Staubach became the full-time starter in 1971, leading the Cowboys to a Super Bowl VI victory in his first season at the helm. He didn't just win, he dominated, throwing for 2 touchdowns and earning Super Bowl MVP honors. That season kicked off a decade of excellence where Staubach became the face of America's team. Known for his clutch performances and unshakable composure, Staubach engineered 23 fourth-quarter comebacks and 15 game-winning drives over his career. The term Captain Comeback wasn't just a nickname, it was a job description. He led the Cowboys to 4 Super Bowl appearances, winning 2, and was selected to 6 Pro Bowls. Staubach retired with a record of 85-29 as a starter, an astonishing .745 winning percentage, one of the best in NFL history. His career passer rating of 83.4 may seem modest by today's inflated numbers, but in the grinded-out run-heavy era of the 1970s, it was elite. Staubach was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1985, cementing a legacy built not just on wins, but on character, leadership, and grace under pressure. He was the kind of player who made teammates believe, fans stand, and opponents sweat. A 10th round pick delayed by military service, who still became one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time? That's more than a draft steal, that's a storybook career. Roger Staubach didn't just lead the Cowboys to glory, he became the living embodiment of loyalty, leadership, and late-round greatness. Those are just some of the best draft steals of the pre-merger era. I know we usually get flack for covering only recent players, so if you enjoyed this, be sure to press the like button and let us know what you guys are going to see next.